Robin DiAngelo is an infamous anti-racism scholar and the author of the book White Fragility. As a white woman, she is outspoken about her belief in crediting minorities, but now she's been accused of plagiarism. In an accountability statement posted on her website, DiAngelo says, quote, "Fellow white people must always cite and give credit to the work of BIPOC people who have informed your thinking." But according to a complaint filed last week at the University of Washington, where she received her PhD in multicultural education, she plagiarized many scholars, including 2 minorities. Now, according to the Washington Free Beacon, DiAngelo's doctoral thesis, Whiteness in Racial Dialogue, a Discourse Analysis, that sounds like riveting reading, it takes 2 paragraphs from Asian American professor Thomas Nakayama without correct attribution. She does not include quotation marks or in-text citations. The Free Beacon also reports that she took material from Asian American professor Stacy Lee, summarizing the work of scholar David Theo Goldberg. Joining us now to discuss is Aaron Sibarium, a writer at the Washington Free Beacon, who broke this story, got a lot of attention on social media. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Robbie.
So I think our viewers understand the importance, the influence of Robin DiAngelo. You know, this is a figure who has gotten actually a lot of mockery from kind of all sides of the political spectrum, I would say, in recent years for her kind of racial obsession. The white people should be trying to like exorcise the demon that is racism from their bodies in almost like a quasi-religious way. But now it turns out, you know, give us the scope of how bad it is that some of her writing on this topic was actually plagiarized from minority scholars, the very thing that she says is like a cardinal sin.
Yeah, so there have obviously been a lot of plagiarism allegations in the past year, many of them against DEI officials. And her plagiarism falls, I would say, on the more severe half of the continuum. It's not the worst that I've seen, but it's pretty bad. It's more extensive. Certainly the passages are longer than I think any of the passages at issue in, say, Claudine Gay's work. Um, the at, in some cases, she borrows 2, 3 paragraphs in a row from other scholars without any kind of in-text attribution. Um, Most of the people are cited in her bibliography, but that's not really a defense to plagiarism. You have to actually make clear which words are your own and which words are your sources, and she manifestly fails to do that on dozens of occasions throughout this dissertation.
So one success is that she's done what many doctoral scholars don't do, and that's have people read her thesis and her work. Can you tell us how you came to this story, Aaron?
I mean, there was a complaint, I obtained it, and then I looked at the examples, verified them myself. Um, and look, I've obviously the Free Beacon has been interested in DiAngelo for a while, all the way back in 2020. We did a lot of reporting on how she made her money, the lack of evidence for the kinds of training she does. One of my favorite stories that my former colleague Charles Lehman wrote was about how she actually was paid more than a Black woman for speaking at an anti-racist diversity training. She made almost twice as much as the Black speaker for just basically showing up and lecturing the audience about their racism. I think that the charlatanism has been a focus of ours for a while, and this was kind of just sort of the proverbial chef's kiss, as it were,
Yeah.
in reporting against DiAngelo.
Yeah, this is, I just looked up the last time I wrote about Robin DiAngelo for Reason was in this training video of hers that surfaced in which she refers to the famous painting, The Creation of Adam, one of those famous works of Renaissance art as epitomizing white supremacy, and she actually mistakes Adam for David, the biblical figure David. So that's some really good. So that was not a plagiarized view. That was just one of her own. This is someone who, as you point, has made a lot of money. Is like the leader, maybe in the top 3 names in this field of anti-racism. seminars and talks, which she's just paid insane amounts of money to give presentations in educational settings, in some corporate settings. What she charges by the minute is astronomical because she portrays herself as this expert on this topic. So it really does. It's not just a gotcha to say that she misattributed her sources or didn't do that correctly or didn't put. Maybe that can sound trivial to people, but like you have to. Journalists, scholars, everyone were expected to. If you're directly quoting someone, you put it in quotes and you say who it's from. You have to paraphrase. You have to be careful if you're just taking large chunks of text from somewhere else and making sure it's done appropriately. And the previous president of Harvard University, who resigned after Claudine Gay, after a lot of her mistakes were pointed out, I think that was absolutely fair. And this is, as you say, this is somewhat even more extensive. Someone who is even more predominantly in a kind of education and scholarship role. It speaks to the intellectual bankruptcy of what she's doing.
Yeah, and I would emphasize too that the PhD credential is really central to her marketing, right? Her website is literally titled Robin DiAngelo, PhD. And it repeatedly references her academic credentials. It says that the term white fragility was coined by DiAngelo in a 2011 academic paper. In fact, it was actually coined in her dissertation, right? So her entire career basically flows from this dissertation, even though it's obviously not as well known as her best-selling books. So the complaint is, in essence, calling into question the legitimacy of the credential on which she has built her career and through which she has made millions of dollars.
I'm a victim of the American graduate school industrial complex. Everyone who's had a life free of academic writing or reading, congratulations. But if you look at this and the comparisons that you provide on the Free Beacon are quite good because you highlight the words in red that are used by these minority scholars and then the words used by DiAngelo. It's a lot of words. It's not just that she read these authors' work and provided a summary. It's a copy paste, change a few words situation. And so, as someone who's been an advocate, DiAngelo, saying if you use ideas from BIPOC scholars, cite them. And there were citations, but there is something egregious about this copy paste, change a few words approach that Robin DiAngelo seemingly took. Can you just speak to how egregious this was? I'm sure you had other examples that you didn't include in the article to keep it brief, because the few that are in there are just really shocking how many exact phrases are the same. But is there more?
There is more, and you can you can read the complaint. The full complaint has more. I would say the ones in the article are probably the worst. But yeah, it doesn't end with the ones in the article. In some cases, she'll do this thing where she will credit the people in text, but she won't put quotation marks around the words. So she makes it seem like she's paraphrasing when in fact she's really copying the language verbatim. The other thing you'll notice about the examples we did highlight is that she often just changes one or two words, and that actually makes it worse than if she had simply copied verbatim, because if you copy it verbatim with no alterations, it might just be that you forgot to put the citation or the quotation marks. You were rushing copy and pasting. It's plausible. When you change a couple words, though, that shows mens rea. That shows that you knew what you were doing and were actively trying to disguise it by making just a few token alterations.
That's a good point.
So that actually, I think, makes it far worse than if she had just literally copied and pasted verbatim. And the other thing you notice is that in some of the passages, she is basically using summaries that another author used of another author. So it makes it look like she's summarizing, the primary source directly, but what she's actually doing is copying from an unacknowledged secondary source.
Sure.
So it looks like she's citing her work, but she's actually not, which is kind of devious. And it also presents almost a discrete kind of academic dishonesty, because what she's in essence doing is she's basically putting like one scholar's words in the mouth of another without saying that that's what she's doing, right? She's making it seem like she's summarizing an author when she's actually relying on a third author's gloss of the original. So all of that speaks to what is at best a pattern of real sloppiness, and at worst, I think, a pattern of kind of serial deception throughout her dissertation.
Erin, great story. Thanks, as always, for your terrific reporting. I know a lot of our viewers will be having a laugh at this one. Thanks so much.
Thank you.